Good morning, sir.
Good morning. How are you?
I am just right. Man, what a gorgeous day. I'm
I,
in
I
proper color attire.
it's nice out there. Let me tell you. So
It is greatness out
it,
there. So,
it is.
oh, so
Well, I got a little bit different setup this morning.
okay.
Melinda finally put me a little corner in the bedroom, so she got tired of me being on the kitchen table. So I've got me a permanent home these days, which is good. So
Okay. You've, you've been dismissed, huh?
I've been dismissed to the farthest corner of the house.
Man, man, oh man. Well, today's a milestone. I get to teach a live in-person Bible study group for the first time since March.
I know.
So
It's
that is very strange. Very good morning, my brother. Good to see you. Welcome. We're really glad that you're here.
Good morning. Yeah, no, I
And
can't wait till I get my first shot later this month. So
yeah, yeah. So, and there's our Georgian. Good morning, brother. It's good to see you. It's nice. It's nice to see at least one of the slinkered boys at work.
yeah, our other one's off on vacation somewhere.
Yeah, he's off, schlepping it around somewhere. So,
That's all
oh
right.
gosh.
He
Well,
needs some time away.
absolutely, absolutely. So, as if the world could become more. Our fair president is currently working through the virus. So,
Seems to be doing well.
want to
Seems to be
pray
doing
for
well.
him. Sure, sure. Man, one of the things that should prove to all of us is that there is nothing 100%. I mean, if there was ever an individual that you thought could be the furthest out of possibility, life just
Hey,
happens, and it's no respecter of position or titles.
no, we all get touched by life in one way or another.
We do,
So
and so we're praying for a speedy recovery, a full recovery for he and his family, and
mhm.
it's good to see Miss Susan this morning. Good morning.
you know,
So
uh, Pastor, I was telling Melinda, I said I have jeans on this morning, and I said I think this is the first time I've worn a pair of jeans or long pants since March. Since I think about
yeah,
March 15th.
I could see that. Yeah,
Yeah.
we
So
did end up kind of quick, and we didn't really have a winter per se. So yeah, absolutely, absolutely, things they
fall is
are.
here.
So, but it is good. Well, we have a new class beginning on Tuesday night. Jeff, you did a great job, and our new class. Brother N.T. Wright's book on the simple good news. It's going to be a great little study, and looking forward to that. Josh will be the lead teacher on that class starting on Tuesday. And our ladies group, fellowship and Bible study are back on campus on Tuesday at 6 as well. So that's exciting. It's nice to have folks back. Good morning to our Tennessee
Kip.
brother. We're really glad that you're there this morning, Kip. Thank you.
So we have Florida, Georgia, Tennessee,
Correct.
and Texas. And
And
where's Paul at this morning? Where's John?
he's in the thriving metropolis that is Caddo.
Okay, I didn't know if he might be on the road somewhere, but good morning,
In
John.
Arkansas. Good morning, Miss Donna. Love you guys.
Arkansas.
Been praying for our family and friends up there. A wonderful man of the Lord stepped into glory about 2 weeks ago, and they celebrated life, but now they carry on, So, but I know Donna is excited. Well, all them hoggers up there because Arkansas pulled off the win, and they didn't go so well, for us Longhorns there, Jim. But it's okay. There'll be another day.
Bulldogs did pretty well this weekend, I think.
Okay.
I think Georgia play. I think I saw where they won.
Yes, I believe Georgia did win.
Yeah.
So it is so weird, because you watch and they're playing, but the vast majority aren't. It's just crazy. And
Well, I know some people are maybe not as consumed with sports since COVID, which is fine. And I'm not either, by the way. But, this whole COVID issue with the way sports are handled is different, right? You've got Cam Newton now who's been diagnosed. You've got, I think, the Titans and Steelers have been pushed because they can't play. And
Right.
I think the Patriots game has been pushed because of Cam Newton. So, and others, I think, but it's crazy.
It is.
It's kind of hard to keep up with a fantasy football team. I can tell you that.
There was a study. The viewership of sports as a whole is down, and some of them are down more than others, but across the board. And I can't help but think, maybe part of it is we just got out of the habit. Mm-hmm. And another part is some of our sports are they're out of sync. Football should be going on, but when hockey season just ends, and basketball will probably end this week, and baseball is really kind of just getting started, good. So.
Yeah. So we finally get a World Series. Well, not finally. We have had a World Series game here before, but Globe Life will get the NLCS and World Series games at Globe Life.
So it's just, it's interesting out there. It's interesting stuff. So we're continuing our study on Samson today. Really, we're going to finish the announcement of Samson to these unlikely parents. And both of my studies today kind of revolve around the theme of recognizing the presence of God. Sometimes we can have people in our very presence, and if we don't recognize them, then we miss those opportunities. And whether they're sports icons. I remember one time I was on a plane with Jim Brown. And I remember walking by him, and I looked, and I thought, "Holy cow!" And it was funny because I was looking around because unless you're a football fan, unless you've been a fan for a while, you wouldn't recognize Jim Brown. But that was kind of a cool thing. But sometimes if we're not careful, we simply don't see what is already in existence around us, and so we're going to be talking about that in the next couple hours, and so that's going to be exciting. I'm looking forward to that. And
good. Well, you'll miss. We're going to talk about the son of encouragement this morning.
All right, Barnabas,
a guy by the name of. So I have Alexa over here, and I don't know why she's beeping in my ear. I didn't say Alexa, son of encouragement, so I don't know why she came. They're always listening, aren't they? But
yes.
Barnabas,
what's going to be funny is what comes up in your Facebook feed.
Absolutely.
Yeah. You'll see all those things coming up. What's funny is I have known people who think themselves an encourager, and they're really not. I know hopefully I'm not stepping on toes here, but just because you have an opinion on something doesn't make you an encourager.
Well, that is true.
Some people think that, just because they feel like they have a witty or wise insight, that, the gift of encouragement is boy, is it needed for sure. And it's fairly easy to identify. And, we've all known people, and, my mother-in-law had the gift of encouragement. Mm-hmm. When you were in her presence and when you left her presence, you always left feeling better than you were when you walked in.
Yeah. Well, self-awareness and self-confession here for sure. It's something I certainly need to work on. So, this lesson is spoken to me first. So,
well, I think sometimes, we, how do we, anyway, I don't want to,
yeah,
I don't want to step on your toes there. So,
mine is pretty much get up, rub some dirt on it, and keep going.
We have a kid's giving his confession here. So,
yeah.
But the world certainly does need encouragers, and encouragement also isn't a false, misleading, or fairy tale type information. A true encourager is an encourager with truth. And that's important too. You have a lot of people that'll stuff you full of candy, but in the end, it's not lasting encouragement. So,
yep, that's true.
Good to see you, Barbara. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So,
good morning.
Well, my brother, I am going to step out and step in with our group next door. And love you guys. Thanks, everyone, for being here. Hope that you'll join us in the 10 o'clock hour, and I'll see you then.
All right. Good morning, all. So we're a little bit different this morning. Josh is out on vacation. Jimmy is teaching in person. So you'll get me for the rest of the time. So hopefully we don't see too many drop off. But so we won't have an end time where we come back together and talk. I'll just sort of end it and close us out when it's time to do that. So, but I appreciate everyone being here this morning. We'll be in Acts, a few different chapters within Acts. But, once in a while in our lives, we come across individuals that, just have a certain attitude towards life that leaves this, indelible impact on us just because of the way they influence us, the way they carry themselves, the way they encourage. And, that impact can have a lasting, impact on us. And we're going to look at that person this morning in God's word. And his name was Joseph from Cyprus, a Levite. And that's what his original name was. So we'll look at the son of encouragement, Barnabas. So let's read together Acts chapter 4, verses 32 through 37. It says, "And the congregation of those who believed were of one heart and soul, and not one of them claimed that anything belonging to him was his own. But all things were common property to them, and with great power the apostles were giving testimony to the resurrection of the Lord Jesus, and abundant grace was upon them all. For there was not a needy person among them, for all who were owners of land or houses would sell them and bring the proceeds of the sales and lay them at the apostles' feet, and they would be distributed to each as any had need. Now Joseph, a Levite of Cyprian birth, who was also called Barnabas by the apostles, which translation means son of encouragement, and who owned a tract of land, sold it and brought the money and laid it at the apostles' feet." So here we have, this, his name was Joseph, and here we have, an individual who the apostles thought, okay, your name does not do justice for what your ministry is. So they renamed him Barnabas, the son of encouragement. Let me take a quick pause. I'd like to welcome all those who's on my watch party. Thanks for joining this morning. So think of that. Here's a man who is wealthy, who is generous, who somehow earned this nickname of being son of encouragement. And he impressed himself, he impressed the apostles so much that they wanted to give him another name, and said, Joseph isn't accurate for you, but you should be called Barnabas. So, and it's important to note that in the Bible, that the change of a name is really significant. Because your name, it symbolized your character, symbolized who you were, maybe who your family name was. But undoubtedly apostles observed a certain sort of character within Joseph and renamed him the son of encouragement. So we'll look at him this morning. And again, Barnabas was the type of person that could draw people to him, that could, encourage others. And we're going to look at two significant people for sure that Barnabas encouraged. But the first time we see him in action is in Acts chapter 4, 36 through 37. We see where he's selling his property so that the money can be shared with anyone in need. And this really gives us a glimpse into maybe Barnabas's, generous character or generous nature. And we see a second time, or that Barnabas has this interaction is with in dealing with Paul, and this was another individual that had their name changed. So in Acts chapter 9, verses 1 through 2, it says, "Now Saul, still breathing threats and murder against the disciples of the Lord, went to the high priest and asked for letters from him to the synagogues at Damascus, so that if he found any belonging to the way, both men and women, he might bring them bound to Jerusalem." So here we have Saul, who once was a persecutor of Christians, who sought after believers and killed them, held the coats of those who stoned believers. But we see here that Paul has been converted. We can read about his conversion on the road to Damascus, and we see that Barnabas is going to meet him. But before his conversion, he had done everything in his power to destroy the church, and he was a zealous persecutor of the church. He was dragging Christians from their homes, throwing them into prison, and killing them. And now we see after his conversion to Christ that Paul comes to Jerusalem. He meets with the church leaders, and it's probably no reason that or no surprise that the church leaders kind of question, the authenticity of his faith or his profession of faith in Christ. And as a devout Pharisee, Saul had again steadfastly hunted down and persecuted followers of Jesus. And I'm sure some of these leaders in the church maybe had friends who were persecuted by Saul, and they just didn't trust him, and they suspected Paul to be a spy. So due to their suspicion, it seemed that Saul's ministry might really end before it even began. But here we see Barnabas, the son of encouragement. He chose to stand in the gap beside Paul. He takes Paul in person. They send Barnabas down to the church, say, okay, go kind of figure out who Saul is, see if he's for real or not. Paul goes and he decides to stand in the gap. He takes Paul in person and he brings him before the apostles, and he explains to them how Paul met Christ on the road to Damascus, and how Christ has changed his life. So Barnabas speaks on behalf of Paul, and then he's accepted by the church in Jerusalem because of the encouraging words of Barnabas. So what do I want to ask us or encourage us this morning is, have we ever had someone stand in the gap for us? I know I have, whether it be in work, or maybe someone didn't maybe trust who I was, didn't know who I was, but someone would speak on my behalf, and I would sort of be welcomed because of what someone else said. And that's what Barnabas is doing here for Paul. He's accepted in the church of Jerusalem, and he's able to launch his ministry because of what Barnabas is doing. So, and I would say, where would Paul be today, without the encouragement of Barnabas? Barnabas had this gift of encouraging, and here we have Paul, who was a persecutor of the faith, wasn't trusted by the church, but we know that goes on to become one of the greatest church leaders, or proponent of the gospel, that we know. So if Barnabas had not offered his hand in fellowship to Saul, maybe his life would have been different. I don't know. The work of the Lord will continue with or without us, but I would like to think that Barnabas had something to do with where Paul is. So those like Barnabas, they offer words of support in a time of need. They offer encouraging words for that's fitting for the moment. And certainly Paul needed some encouragement in his life at this particular time. So, and I would challenge us this week, especially if you have employees, or close with coworkers, or leading a group of volunteers, whatever the case is, encouragement goes a long way. And I would encourage you to encourage those around you. So as we move into Acts chapter 11, we're going to look at some things that were going on, with the Gentiles. And Acts chapter 11, verses 19 through 26 says, "So then those who were scattered because of the persecution that occurred in connection with Stephen made their way to Phoenicia and Cyprus and Antioch, speaking the word to no one except to Jews alone. But there were some of them, men of Cyprus and Cyrene, who came to Antioch and began speaking to the Greeks also, preaching the Lord Jesus. And the hand of the Lord was with them, and a large number who believed turned to the Lord. The news about them reached the ears of the church at Jerusalem, and they sent Barnabas off to Antioch. Then when he arrived and witnessed the grace of God, he rejoiced and began to encourage them, all with resolute heart, to remain true to the Lord, for he was a good man and full of the Holy Spirit and of faith. and considerable numbers were brought to the Lord. And he left for Tarsus to look for Saul. And then when he had found him, he brought him to Antioch, and for an entire year they met with the church and taught considerable numbers, and the disciples were first called Christians in Antioch. So again, in Acts chapter 11, we see Barnabas in action again. This time he's dealing with the Gentiles. And we need to remember that, during the first century, the Gentiles were regarded as outsiders. We're Gentiles. And they were regarded as outsiders and unfit for God's kingdom. So when the Jewish Christians in Jerusalem heard that something was going on with the Gentiles, they wanted someone to go check it out. So they send Barnabas, and Barnabas goes into Antioch. He witnesses the grace of God. He witnesses what's going on within the church. He encourages them to keep doing what they're doing, and he rejoices with them and stay faithful for the Lord. So here we see Barnabas trusted once again for his insight, for his encouragement. Go check out what's going on with these Gentiles, just as you went and checked out Saul, and give us a report. And he came back and gave a good report. And now we see, eventually Barnabas becomes Paul's companion on the first missionary journey. Now they were traveling together and preaching together, but Barnabas is the senior person on this team because Paul is still kind of learning the ropes. So Barnabas is a senior person, and we know that it doesn't take very long for Paul to kind of step into a leadership role. But here we see, they're together on this first missionary journey. There's some success that's going on there. Paul and Barnabas make this plan for a second journey, and however, this is where some of the disagreement starts, to happen between Barnabas and Paul. So Barnabas wants to take John, also called Mark, but Paul doesn't want to take him because John Mark deserted them during the first missionary journey. So, according to church tradition, John Mark is the writer of the Gospel of Mark. He went on the first missionary journey with Paul and Barnabas, and it was Barnabas who encouraged Mark to go with him and Paul to Antioch. He was probably a young man, a youth at the time. We don't know for what reason that he dropped out, but Mark did drop out of this first missionary journey. Maybe he was too young. Maybe he didn't fully understand what the pressures may be for mission work. Maybe reality was setting in. Maybe he missed home. We don't know. But whatever the reason was, Mark quit and left. And it did not sit well with Paul at all. So we can say that, Paul wasn't that encouraging for sure at this particular time. So because of this experience, Paul is not willing to take a chance on Mark again. That's probably a whole other lesson, a little short-sighted probably of Paul, but Paul is committed and determined, and he's saying, hey, if you're going to walk this walk, then let's do it and run this race, the way that it should be run. So Barnabas and Paul has this disagreement, and they part company. In Acts 15, verses 36 through 41, they're just going to agree to disagree. So Barnabas takes Mark, and they sail for Cyprus. So let me read 15, 36 through 41, so you kind of get this, in our minds. So after some days, Paul said to Barnabas, let us return and visit the brethren in every city in which we proclaim the word of the Lord and see how they are. Barnabas wanted to take John, called Mark, along with them also, but Paul kept insisting that they should not take him along, who had deserted them in Pamphylia and had not gone with them to the work. And there occurred such a sharp disagreement that they separated from one another. And Barnabas took Mark with him and sailed away to Cyprus. But Paul chose Silas and left, being committed by the brethren to the grace of the Lord. And he was traveling through Syria and Cilicia, strengthening the churches. So here we see there's this disagreement, and it's a sharp disagreement. So I can just imagine some of the conversations that might have taken place. Paul is adamant and determined, and Barnabas is trying to reason with Paul and encourage him, and they just had to sort of agree to disagree. But the result of the disagreement is, yes, it's a division in leadership. Barnabas takes Mark, and Paul chooses Silas. But actually there's a blessing here because the missionary effort has just been doubled, because Paul and Barnabas both are capable leaders. And I think it's important, and it's actually good that, that God includes this story of disagreement between church leaders, because disagreement does happen, among church leaders. It's a real authentic church with real authentic people, and those disagreements are going to happen. And it is healthy, when that happens, as long as it's done in a respectful way. So we're gonna kind of assume here that they sort of agreed to disagree and they just parted their ways. And what I'll say about church leadership here, I don't have Jimmy or Josh to kind of bat this around with me, but we don't always agree on everything. But we are always in lockstep with unity. And what I mean by that is one of us may throw some type of idea out, and it's not immediately accepted by the other two, and we have a conversation. And what I will tell you though, when we leave that room, we leave that room unified. And I cannot think one time in all the years of service with our pastor or with Josh where there has been any type of disrespectful disagreement in anything that we talked about. So as a church, we are very fortunate to have two very mature, loving individuals in Pastor Jimmy and Pastor Josh. And I can't say, enough, about them. They are just so grounded and level headed. So don't know what the conversation was like between Paul and Barnabas, but I would think Barnabas was probably more the level-headed between the two. So what does harm to the church is when disagreement is turned into a personal attacks, and that never takes place, or some type of political campaign or some way to divide, the church, or some destructive accusations or anything like that. And that just doesn't take place with any of the leaders that we have in our church, whether it's children leaders or worship team or Awana or whatever the case is. So we are very fortunate for that, and I'm very thankful. So Paul and Barnabas did this right. They decided they would agree to disagree, and they parted ways, and they simply just moved on. But in spite of their disagreement, God's mission continued, right? In spite of those personalities, and I'm sure Paul's personality is very distinct from Barnabas's personality, but God's kingdom was expanded. Just the way it is with my personality is very different from Jimmy, which is very different from Josh, but God is able to work, in spite of our differing personalities. So Barnabas demonstrates an encouraging spirit when he parted ways with Paul. He invites Mark to join him. We have to remember, when Paul was suspected of being, a spy, just trying to understand who the Christians may be, that's what the church thought. It was Barnabas who stood up for Paul and included him in the church and spoke on his behalf. It was Barnabas who affirmed the authenticity of the Gentile church. It's Barnabas who's saying, hey, we need to give this young man another chance. He might have disappointed us on the first missionary journey, but let's see what he does on the second one. Yes, he was unreliable, but let's see if we can instill some discipline in him. So Barnabas saw the potential in John Mark, and he believed in him, and he took him along and, encouraged him. So Barnabas takes him with him. So, and we'll get to in, let's fast forward several years, and we'll kind of see, all is well that ends well. So we see when Paul refuses to take Mark with him, we might think that it might be the end of the relationship. And sometimes we may say we're going to agree to disagree, but sometimes we sever relationships, or we part ways with individuals, and we never do anything to try and reconcile that relationship. But we're going to see here where something must have happened between Paul and Mark. But we see Paul's second letter to Timothy in 2 Timothy chapter 4, verses 9 through 11. It says, make every effort to come to me soon. For Demas, having loved this present world, has deserted me and gone to Thessalonica. Crescens has gone to Galatia, Titus to Dalmatia. Only Luke is with me. Pick up Mark and bring him with you, for he is useful to me for service. So we see here that it's really truly amazing. It's really truly, remarkable that toward, the end of Paul's life, that he's writing to Timothy, another younger man in the faith. And it's kind of funny, I guess it's a pattern that Paul was losing coworkers in ministry for some reason, because Demas he said he loved this present world and has deserted me, and Cretan is gone, and Titus is gone. But several people have deserted Paul for some reason, and Luke is with him at this particular time. But what Paul says next, he says, "Get Mark and bring him with you, because he is helpful to me in ministry." So, what a remarkable transformation that must have taken place over the years in this relationship between Paul and Mark, who Paul was disappointed with Mark in the beginning, saying, I don't want to take him anymore because he failed us once and he's going to fail us again. Barnabas takes him under his wing, if you will, and encourages him. And now we see towards the end of Paul's ministry, or the end of his life, that he wants Mark with him. So something must have taken place. So, and what I would say is that it probably had something to do with the encouragement of Barnabas stepping in and standing in the gap, if you will, for Mark, who believed in this young man and sort of poured himself into him and gave him another chance. And all of us, especially young adults, need or young individuals in the faith, whether you're adult or youth. We need a Barnabas in our life, whether it's a parent, whether it's an aunt or an uncle, or a mentor in the church, who would believe in them and see their best qualities, encourage them through their mountaintops and their valleys of their life, and stand by them in times of trouble. So, the ministry of encouragement has the potential to have a lasting effect on, the lives of those around us. So, I would encourage you, if you're an encourager, to keep it up. If that is something that you don't do so well, and in my case, I'm not really that good at encouraging other folks. I've got more of a type A personality. It's not a justification. It's just who I am. But I certainly need to cultivate this particular discipline as well in this particular ministry. So, but by looking at some of these events in the life of Barnabas, whether it be with Paul early on in his ministry, whether it be with the early church, the early Gentiles, whether it be with Mark himself, maybe we can learn some ways to encourage others. So I think I've got 4 or 5 ways of doing that, and then we'll wrap up. But so one is encourage others through giving. According to Acts 4:37, Barnabas, he said he's he sold his land. He had land. He sold it. He brought the money and laid it at the apostles' feet. I'm not asking you to go sell your house and go sell all your possessions and go lay it at the feet of your church leaders and help someone else. What I'm asking you to try and do is notice a need if there's there. So Barnabas saw a need, and he was moved to meet that need, and that is encouraging when we meet the needs of others. And we may say, "Hey, I'm not rich like Barnabas apparently was. I don't have anything to sell," and that's okay. But there's other ways that we can apply this. There's more than money that we can give. I believe that Barnabas not only gave his time, he gave his advice. He gave an ear to listen to, whether it be Paul early on, or the Gentile church, or even Mark. So giving back to God what He has given us serves the ministry of encouragement, and it does bring comfort to those around us. Something that we may think is small, someone else will think is huge. Secondly, encourage others by standing in the gap on their behalf, being a friend to those who need it. In Acts 9, we read of Saul, who had been an enemy of the early church. He was killing Christians. He became a believer. The church was scared of him, didn't trust him. And then sort of summarizing verses 26 and 27 of Acts chapter 9 again, it says Saul wanted to join the disciples, wanted to do the work of the Lord. They were afraid of him. They didn't believe his conversion. Barnabas took him and brought him to the apostles, stood in the gap, got to know Paul, and sort of spoke on his behalf. And Barnabas continued to encourage Paul by extending his love, his friendship, and probably some pretty, sound advice, and probably held Paul accountable from time to time. And a friend that will hold us accountable is certainly a friend indeed. Um, we need friends in our lives that not only encourage us and lift us up and hold us up, but will also hold us accountable for the things we're not doing so well. Third, encourage others by building bridges. Another part of the life of Barnabas, and remember, included the church in Antioch. Revival had broken out. The church at Jerusalem, they were suspect to what was going on down there. They send Barnabas down, check out what's going on. He verified everything was good. Barnabas had a good standing within the church, so he spoke on their behalf. He encouraged them to keep doing what they were doing. These were brothers and sisters of the faith that were sort of isolated, if you will. They were Gentiles. They were outsiders. Barnabas comes alongside of them and starts building bridges between other believers. So I'd encourage you, again, one way that we can encourage others is by building partnerships, by building bridges, by making introductions, by speaking on others' behalf if they need it. Encourage others by developing spiritual qualities. Number 4, when Barnabas saw what was good in the church at Antioch, he realized that they needed a leader with an organizational mind and some spiritual insight, and he knew Paul could help him. So he went and got Paul and he brought him there. Again, he's helping Paul and he's helping the church. Barnabas went to Tarsus to seek Saul. When he found him, he brought them to Antioch, and they stayed there a year teaching the people. So Barnabas knew that Paul needed someone to kind of, a place to get his feet wet, if you will, and he would be good for the church. The church needed someone like Paul, and Barnabas brought them together and was helping both the church and Paul sort of develop some spiritual chops, if you will. And what's interesting here is Barnabas never he didn't write one book of the Bible. He wasn't inspired by God to do that, but he was inspired to encourage. And so he encouraged and developed 2 people who did, Paul and Mark. And he encouraged and developed their leadership. He encouraged and shaped them and developed those individuals in a way. So God used his encouraging spirit and had a lasting impact on Paul and Mark, which has a lasting impact on you and I. And he placed he placed these men in an opportunity of need, which Barnabas could fulfill. So for us, as we see that need in other individuals, I would encourage us to meet that need. And who knows what Paul or Mark that we can influence that will go on and do other things. And we shouldn't. And Barnabas was not, from what we can tell, was not. What's the word? Upset or jealous that Paul and Mark went on to probably I caution to say do better things, but to become more well known maybe than Barnabas. And so I would encourage you. I want to tell one story. Being in corporate back when you've got different titles, but I was a director, and my nickname at the time, people would call me the VP maker, because I'd have people that worked for me that went on to become vice presidents, which would be not over me, to go on and do other things. And as we encourage and pour ourselves into others, we can't become jealous of the success that those individuals have. Now, I went on to become, VP and senior VP and those type of things, but because of the encouragement and the belief that others had in me. So what I'm saying is, as we encourage folks in the faith, as we stand in the gap for others, don't be jealous if they move on to, a brighter light, if you will. And I would like to think that Barnabas was really proud of both Paul and Mark, and saw them in action, because he saw them maybe when they weren't so bright. And So just don't, as you stand in the gap for others, and others move on beyond you, make sure that you don't get jealous of that. So, um, and then also Barnabas sought to mend that broken relationship between um, Paul and Mark. So, so lastly, encourage others by rebuilding relationships. Just as I would like to think that Barnabas had, a hand in that relationship between Paul and Mark. Again, early in the ministry, Paul didn't really want to have anything to do with John Mark anymore, just because he failed. He failed them in Paul's mind on the first missionary journey. But somewhere along the way, Mark leaves the team. He goes home, and Paul takes Silas. Barnabas takes Mark. But somehow they come back together, and then we see where Paul is asking Mark to come back for him because he values that particular relationship. So Barnabas was certainly an encourager. We too are called to be encouragers. 2 Corinthians 1:3 says the Bible calls God the God of all comfort, or encouragement, if you will. So for us to encourage others is to imitate and glorify God. And if you've been with us on Tuesday nights, we went through the book, So You Want to Be Like Christ. This is another way that we can imitate and glorify God, is to be an encourager. Find ways to be, a positive role model, to say positive things instead of always negative things. Hopefully your Instagram feeds or your Facebook feeds or even your conversations are not filled with negativity. If they are, we may want to check that and figure out ways where we can encourage more. So there are many, I don't know if this is a word, Barnabases. I don't know if that's a word or not, that's in our church or in the church. But if God has given you this gift, it's a precious ministry. I would encourage you to cultivate that ministry. For those of us that encouragement doesn't come natural, I would ask that we would take this example of Barnabas and maybe learn from some of the things that he did throughout his life in building these bridges in this relationship. And of course, lean on the Holy Spirit to help us develop this spirit of encouragement, because we all need a Barnabas in our life. And for the glory of God, maybe we can say, God, will you make me an encourager? And then we can start working on that. So, all right. So that is in the lesson. I'd normally bring Jimmy or Josh back on, so we won't do that. So what I'll say is, if you're going to join us for the morning service, either online or in person, please take a break, get you some coffee, go to the restroom, get some breakfast, whatever you need to do. Join us at 10. I will leave the house and go back up to the church. Again, thanks for everyone on my watch party for joining us this morning. I'm not sure who's teaching online next week. I don't think it's me. I think it's Pastor Jimmy. So thank you for joining us, and everyone have a great day. God bless.